You are listening to the IoT for All Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT for All podcast on the IoT for All Media Network. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon, one of the co-creators of IoT for All. Now, before we jump into this episode, please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or join our newsletter at iotforall.com/newsletter to catch all the newest episodes as soon as they come out. Are you tired of overspending on data plans? Do you need more consistent coverage? Are you over-negotiating complicated contracts? Well, Simon IoT gets it. That's why they offer customized, transparent data services across the globe. With flexible contracts, taxes, and fees included in one simple price, and user-friendly data management, your data is in your control. Their LTE SIM cards are scalable to your needs regardless of the industry you're in or the devices you need connected. Learn more at simoniot.com/IFA. So, without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the IoT for All podcast. Welcome, Adel, to the IoT for All show. How are things going on your end?
It's going great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Let's start off by having you do a quick introduction to our audience. Talk about your background experience, anything you think will be relevant for our audience to get a better sense of who they're listening to.
Sure. Yeah. Basically, my background was it's all in life science. I spent my entire life developing drugs and medicines. When I was actually in the pharmaceutical sector, but I always have been like at the interface between the science and the technology, and always convinced that the two are complementing to each other. And I always follow this route since my PhD, which I did actually in France, dedicated especially to the oncology. And then went to the pharmaceutical sector, where basically I built a lot of this informatic research, mixing the science and the technology together. And came to this country like in early 2000 as a part of some of the merger happening, I think, in this area, and spent again 10 more years here. And before really just taking off, leaving the corporate side, going actually to the Silicon Valley, where I stayed actually more than 6 years, I think, and spending basically my time doing a lot of medtech entrepreneurial activities, get my first time CEO position there. And always, again, I think at this area, how we can enable technology to do a better job in terms of health outcome for people. So that's basically my life. I just come back here in the East Coast, like in 2018, where come back a little bit to school in Princeton, New Jersey, and where I actually met my co-founder, Professor Jia, which we started actually New Tigers. This is basically a short story about 20 years of my life.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit more about New Tigers. I know obviously it's out of Princeton, which is where the Tigers name comes from. Or the Tigers part of your name comes from. But tell us a little bit more about kind of the story behind the founding of the company, what you all do, and kind of the opportunity you saw in the market to start this project.
Yeah, I think when you're looking to the history of what New Tigers is doing right now, which is basically IoT-based AI-powered companies for many different use cases, and our core business is really related to healthcare. But one of the key challenge there was always, how I can actually do more inference and trying to identify some of the really onset of the symptoms before something big just happening. And I have been through a lot of personal stories, unfortunately, in my life when it comes to healthcare. I lost my sister from a breast cancer.
I'm sorry.
With something which has been built up for 2 years without noticing anything. The same thing happened, I think, with my uncle, which I actually also think we lost him, I think, from a heart attack. So really, so then it comes really then to these questions, how we can actually, monitor and just help identify this early onset of all these major killer disease. So that was really the motivation. So about what they have been doing for the last 20 years. And again, I think when I met actually Professor Jia, I was actually coming back to the school, learning more about all this edge computing, so this AI energy efficiencies. I met him actually during one of his courses, and he was dedicated to edge computing, which is really a fascinating word in the sense that a lot of these solutions for the last 5 years were mostly cloud-based. But Professor Jha has been basically doing 30 years of this research and how we can actually make this complex kind of technology available or portable in more resource and space constrained environment, like any edge device. An edge device is just basically a connected object. Right. So that's where really it started. And what New Tigers is doing is basically packaging all this great innovation happening in the IoT medical devices, in addition to a lot of these innovations in deep learning. And then, of course, I think focusing on some of the core problems which never been solved before. And healthcare, of course, I think was a big one. Right. And that's the reason New Tigers is focusing primarily at that stage of developing or applying this commercially all this innovation from Princeton.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that kind of backstory. It's been seems like a very exciting kind of journey to where you all are now. I wanted to dive in a little bit more to kind of the offerings and talk about some of the things that you all are doing. So I know you have, or I guess talk to us a little bit more about COVID Deep, kind of what that is and the challenges that you all came across when building that solution.
Yeah, I think that, again, I think when I met Professor Jha, he was actually doing some proof of concept in the area of diabetes and mental health. And the hypothesis at that time, that's basically when you have like a disease, it's actually printed in your body, right? And then you can capture some very informative information from your physiological signals, whether it's related to your heart electrical activities, your skin temperature, your oxygen saturations. Actually, all this information is basically digitally, related to any medical conditions. And that was actually like the initial premise. But it's one thing, of course, to do the hypothesis. It's another thing just to prove it. And that's what he started actually doing that in the area of diabetes. And how it works, we are using some of these medical devices, whether it's a smartwatch, which has a lot of these medical sensors, which has been, by the way, approved by, in general, the regulations, whether in Europe or here in the United States. When you have some of these connected watches now, which has an EKG, this is like a clinically validated EKG replacing these bulky things that you can actually have at the hospital. So the challenge then was how I can actually decipher all the different data coming from this physiological, which you capture from these sensors, and make sense of it and trying to differentiate somebody who can be healthy versus who can be, for example, diabetics type 1 or diabetics type 2. And that's basically the premise of a lot of things I think we're doing here at New Tigers. And the way which comes actually to COVID-19, we pivoted actually after this proof of concept in diabetes and in mental health, like early 2020. There was like a big professor actually in the Pavia in Italy, who is one of the major influential in infectious disease and who learned about some of the paper we did in the proof of concept. And he contacted us and back and saying, okay, can you do this actually for COVID-19? It was actually March 20 last year. Is the middle of the pandemic. You can imagine going there as scared with my CTO. I think going there, collect the data. And the way it works, I think we're going and connecting, giving actually a smartwatch to a different cohort. And the cohort are separated between people which are healthy versus the people who has this COVID-19. And as you know, there's actually these three different kind of severity of the disease, whether it can be asymptomatic positive, that means you have the virus, but you don't show any symptom. And plus the severity of the people which has, these symptoms, whether they can stay at home or they can be, unfortunately, need to be oxygenated or even intubated at the hospital. So we put this sensors device through a smartwatch on those guys. In general, is 30 participants per cohort, just for to build up the statistical power. And you get all these data, and it's pretty actually, and that's one of really the innovation there. The data collection is pretty quick. It's like 1 month when you compare like a drug development where you need like years of collecting data before proving even the initial proof of concept of your product. Here, this kind of the pivotal clinical trial, when you're using this kind of technologies, is between 1 to 2 months. So you collect this data, and this is then where the secret sauce, I think, which we have, I think, with Princeton University through some of this deep learning technology, we're able to generate models who can actually classify a person being like negative or versus positive with these different severities of the disease. Wow. So once you get this model, you can actually then, because of this characteristic of the technology, we have licensed to Princeton University. We making these very complex neural networks, I think, very light, still accurate, very energy efficient. So you can actually embed them in any edge device or any connected object, whether it's of course, the smartwatch itself, or it could be of course, I think the smartphone, or it could be like even a ring, a connected ring. So you can actually then afterwards, you can do the inference actually within the edge device, and you don't need any connections to any cloud. So it preserves your security and your privacy.
That's fantastic. That's great. And are there any other use cases or kind of applications of your all's technology that you'd be willing to kind of share with our audience to talk a little bit more about what you all are doing?
I mean, I think perhaps one of the important things I think I want to emphasize. Ryan, first of all, I think and that's really the kind of feedback and interaction we're having. There's a lot of education to do about this kind of solutions, healthcare solutions, which are more integrated technologies. It seems a little bit magic to some extent, but this is these at New Tigers who are really doing the hard work. I think working with a clinical expert, basically generating this data, the proof through clinical studies, and actually COVID Deep right now, it's actually under review at the FDA. So, which is just telling you it's not a toy, it's a reality today, using this very integrated AI and sensor-based medical devices. We can actually read the body and hopefully distinguish a particular medical condition from another one. But as you have said, right, I think this is a technology which can be the transports to many verticals. And another one, for example, something which we heard even ourselves just last year, we have been contacted by a smart footwear company. And to our big surprise, I think, why actually are you connecting us? So, and the reason is that basically had like a smart insole with embedded sensors there, which can capture basically the mobility of the persons. You have pressure sensors, you have mobility sensors, you have these GPS kind of sensors there, gyrometers, etc., accelerometers, and actually. That's what we heard. Actually, I mean, your feet is telling a lot about actually your health. There's like 8,000 type of nerves which are basically at the end of your body, and if something is happening, your feet knows it. So there's plenty of application. One of the application, for example, is a lot of, I think, in health. Mobility disorders, and when it comes to Parkinson's or these kind of things. The same things. That's exactly, we're taking this information from the sensors, right? And then we're able, for example, to classify some being basically sitting without no activity or running or going upstairs, downstairs, or loaded just going upstairs or downstairs, for example. So you can identify a lot of kind of mobility patterns, which can actually have different purposes. Health, of course, is one of them, but security, for example, in plants. I think to be sure that, as a plant manager, you understand, you can assess actually the risk of your workforce, for example, so in a particular environment. That's the kind of very surprising applications when you have this kind of technology, which can be transported to many use cases. And that's basically another example of that. But there's a lot of things happening in industrial IoT as well.
So on the security side, how are you all kind of approaching the security elements with all of this medical data and all this information that you're collecting? I know you have a platform that's kind of, or at least a tool that kind of focuses on security. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of how you're bringing that into everything that you have going on the AI side and the final application side?
Sure. First of all, I think cybersecurity, I think, is huge, right? I think I want just to make sure, I think with the technology we have licensed to this professor, everything we do at Metaires is actually focused in IoT device, right? How I can not only do derive applications for monitoring and screening for medical conditions, or how I can actually monitor somebody, or how I can actually monitor a particular supply chain to do predictive maintenance for materials, for example. Of course, I think and we are completely unprepared. I mean, the cybersecurity, it's already a huge problem by itself, but we are living in a very hyper-connected world. There would be more than 80 billion kind of the connected object, I think, by 2025. We're living in this hyper-connected world. And from the cybersecurity now, for the last 5 years, this is actually one of the primary target of the hackers, is the IoT device. Basically, I can hack your house through your temperature monitoring, for example, or I can hack my medical device, my heart rate, embedded heart rate, for example, device, just directly there. So I think this is really the key things. I think we completely unprepared. The industry don't spend enough, I think, to protect basically all these cyber physical network system for all these connected objects. Gotcha. And the way we approach it is absolutely, unique as well. In general, what you do, I think, when you're looking for liabilities, you're basically just listening to the network, right? I think, and you identify a particular liabilities, breaching a particular server to access some of the data, and then you start patching. It's all in this overreactive mode, which is inefficient, very costly, right? But the way actually this professor just attack it is really about, again, combining the building blocks of all these cyber threats. I mean, a cyber attack, it's basically a piece of software. It's a piece of code which you can actually dissect, like in different building blocks, right? Sure. And then you can, of course, so far there's I think for the last 5 years, I think more than 40 kind of IoT-based attack. And when we generated this knowledge base of this building block, and we are able to use that, combine that with AI, learn from it, with first stage is to reproduce actually the known attack, just building, just from this knowledge base of this building block of all these different attacks which happened actually in the past. So which was also, I think, already like a big achievement. But one of the things we were not even actually able to publish that, because one of the things I think you can do then from there, okay, so from this knowledge base, you are able to reproduce, but what are the many possible, because it's a combinatorial problem, right? You have all these different building blocks. Some of them are coming from one attack, but then they can actually be combined to come actually from what we call zero-D attack. That's basically attack would never happened yet, but it are absolutely feasible, talking, of course, to the expert, etc. So there were like 120 different new attacks which were possible. And that's what actually Shark, that's the technology who's doing this. It's just basically building this knowledge base and then looking to identify a possible zero-D attack in the future. And of course, I think one of the things we did just very after is doing this defense, how we can actually design, this upfront defense, and then so you can actually anticipate this attack in the future. And that's what another tools, another version of Shark, which is more like the attacking kind of piece, that the Gravitas is helping answer all these defense aspects. So in the future now, what you're going to have with this kind of tools, in any cyber physical system, you can actually not only install this silent kind of smart cyber agent, which not only knows already what happened in the past, so they can block them right away, but more importantly, actually anticipate and have already the defense for something never happened before. So that's the uniqueness of what actually Professor Jair has developed at Princeton, which we are using now, again, in many applications, because of course, healthcare, it's a big one, of course.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that kind of information. That's great to kind of understand a little bit more into what you're doing on the security side. I did want to kind of expand on a few topics we've talked about here as we're kind of finishing up. And The main topic I wanted to explore was a little bit more about Edge AI and talking to our audience briefly about what Edge AI actually is and kind of the benefits of Edge AI versus traditional AI being done in the cloud, and how that overall is impacting IoT.
Yeah, of course. I think when we're talking about Edge AI, it's basically any possible smart connected object, right?
Okay.
I think it's really how we can actually port or embed a lot of these intelligent services in connected object. And that's what basically Edge is about. It's not in the cloud, it's at the edge. So that's one. I think, and of course, I think it's a big problem because most of these AI technologies or the neural network model which are generated are not only, I think, very big. I think that's one, but also they are very energy consuming. So that's the reason most of the time they need this cloud-based kind of infrastructure to do wherever the training, generate these models, and afterwards use them to do the inference predictions on them. Right. So, and this is where the innovation is coming through some of the kind of lab from Professor Zhao, who's actually taking all these fantastic capabilities, now able just to put them like in this edge kind of resource and energy constraint environment with Edge AI. So what does it do, right? I think that's the questions, and it's fair to ask, why actually are you doing this? I think if I can run that in the cloud, that doesn't care, I think, where I think it can be run, so long as I have the service I'm looking for. Actually, there's three big things. I think that first of all, the trend is really toward how I can actually preserve my privacy and my security. And as you know, infiltrating the cloud environment, there's much more exposure, much more risk, and basically porting this kind of capabilities in edge device increase actually and preserve more actually your privacy security. Privacy, for example. So we have, again, a proof of concept, which we now, I think we are in the way to productize, is predicting depression, right? Using the same platform, basically connected devices, who has all these smart sensors, you capture the information about your physiological signals, and then you do this proof of clinical, you get basically able to generate a model which can differentiate somebody from being in baseline healthy versus somebody who can be in the rise to be depressive, right? Imagine you have that in your iPhone, right? And that's something which can be hacked, right? I think all the inference you're doing, some days you're okay, sometimes, unfortunately, you're in this depression mode. You don't want that to be hacked, right? And that's really one of the premise of the Edge AI. The other importance is preserving your privacy, and the people are under the control of this data. We used to, unfortunately, to have all bruising kind of history data or the buying habit just stolen by many kind of different companies. I mean, a lot of people are not ready that for their healthcare information. So they want to be secure. They want to be private, and they basically in control of all this kind of the data. And that's really one of the added value of having all these new capabilities embedded in edge devices.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And where do you kind of see Edge AI playing kind of a leading role in certain industries, or are there certain industries where you see Edge AI playing a bigger role? And kind of where do you see, I guess, the largest growth potential for Edge AI to kind of be involved in different use cases or particular use cases that may come to mind?
Yeah. I mean, cybersecurity, again, is like a common ground. So there's going to be cybersecurity for IoT overall. So I think it doesn't matter whether it's in healthcare or it's a connected object, right?
Okay.
But when it comes to IoT AI, Edge AI, I think there's really huge opportunities in the area of industrial IoT. We're starting actually talking to the aerospace and I mean, producing like a helicopter, it's pretty complex, but already a piece of it, like a blade of the helicopter, it's, I mean, huge volume information along the supply chain, the different materials which need to be used, etc., to ensure the quality basically of this blade at the end, right? And one of the challenge is really how I can, now that a lot of this supply chain is getting connected with a lot of smart sensors which can collect the information about the vibrations, the imagery, for example, to detect any defect. So this is where I think this industry is completely behind when it comes to these AI efficiencies. I think along the value chain, we believe this is really a huge vertical, which we already have been interacting with some major player in the area.
Right. Yeah, I think those are great points. Edge AI is something we've been talking kind of about here and there, but not into the detail I think it deserves, with the role that it's definitely starting to grow and play in IoT solutions. So this has been fantastic. I do want to ask, is there anything kind of new and exciting coming out of New Tigers anytime soon, or anything our audience should pay attention to? And at the same time, what's the best way for people to follow up, to ask questions or learn more?
Yeah, sure. I think thank you for asking that, Ryan. Appreciate that. I think New Tigers actually were raising our Series A money right now. Nice. I think that's a great moment, I think, to be involved, and especially for the people interested about really the new normal in healthcare. Is going to be more about virtual care, more and more delivered through telemedicine, for example. We're heavily, obviously, embedded there, and we are one of the pioneers in this area. The second, of course, I think we have our New Tigers website, www.newtigers.com. I think you can learn a lot of things about what we do. And the next for us really innovations is really about really addressing more medical unmet need. We're working, for example, in new category of the product, instead of just doing screening, which is like the COVID deep, right? I think whether you are positive or negative, we're developing new category of the product using this sensor-based technology to monitor the exacerbations of medical conditions. Like one of them, and then one of the next product, it's for sickle cell anemia, which is a horrible disease. And we're working with the community of this disease to improve basically their quality of life using this kind of technology.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I wish you all the best of luck with kind of all those projects, as well as the Series A raising round. Sounds like a lot of exciting things going on. I'm sure that money, when you're able to complete the round, will go to some good use. So thanks again for taking the time to connect today and kind of sharing your insights on what you have going on, as well as all the Edge AI in-depth knowledge that you were able to kind of share with our audience there. So I really appreciate it. And thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah. And thank you, Ryan. And just for perhaps one thing's final thought, I like actually your motto about IoT for all, because I think one of the really also motivation we have, how we can actually democratize the access to these very complex, I think, technologies. And that's the reason also for us in New Tigers is the intelligence for all. So I like the similarity between the motto. And thank you so much for the invitations. I'm certainly looking forward, I think, perhaps the next event coming back in the show as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what we're doing aligns with what you're trying to accomplish at least a philosophical level. So this has been great. And I definitely would love to have you back at some point in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, and have a good day.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this week on the IoT for All podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please leave us a rating or review, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you're listening to us on. Also, if you have a guest you'd like to see on the show, please drop us a note at ryan@iotforall.com, and we'll do everything we can to get them as a featured guest. Other than that, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.